Hello everybody, welcome back to Side Projects. Today, communism, skyscrapers. Two things that probably do well on this channel, so enjoy. The Soviet Union was in a tough spot in the years following World War II. They'd lost an enormous, at least they won, they lost an enormous portion of their young population, yet they received little recognition for their contribution to the Allied war effort. The USSR's ideological enemy, the United States, boasted some of the world's grandest skyscrapers, but Stalin looked at Moscow and he saw a city still recovering from a multi-year battle with the German army. He felt that the Soviet capital needed its own awe-inspiring architectural wonders to show that communists could build skyscrapers. So he began a project in the late 1940s to change that situation, ordering the construction of a handful of skyscrapers that would change Moscow's skyline forever. Today, on the video, Stalin's skyscrapers, Moscow's Seven Sisters. The first Soviet skyscraper project actually began in the late 1930s, and it was a building appropriately called the Palace of the Soviets. We've actually got a video coming up on that on the Mega Projects channel, the sister channel of this channel. It's probably out already if you're watching this. It's not out as I'm recording, but it probably will be. So, you know, YouTube search it. I've linked to it below, but I'll probably forget. But its construction was halted by the German invasion of 1941. Instead, the metal frame was broken down and used in the building of the Moscow defense ring. After the war, the palace's key architect, Boris Arfan, repeatedly pressed Stalin to give the palace a bit of another go, but Stalin had a change of heart. Instead of building one massive structure, which by the way was going to have a massive statue of Lenin on the top, he would build 8 slightly less massive structures. The new plan was called Vysotki, and Stalin had multiple reasons for abandoning the palace in favor of this new plan. The palace's legacy would have been tarnished by its connection to the Comintern, the organization founded by Vladimir Lenin, which still played a considerable role in Soviet politics when the palace was first planned. Stalin personally saw to it that the Comintern was dissolved before the end of the war, and he was committed to forging his own legacy, away from that of Lenin and Communist International. Along with boosting his personal legacy, Stalin wanted to improve Moscow's and the Soviet Union's public image, especially compared to their capitalist allies turned enemies. After all, he saw Russia as the nation that had just led the Allies to victory in the apocalyptic war against tyranny, and he wanted to display their might for the world to see. Nikita Khrushchev recalled Stalin's words, claiming that he said, "We won the war. Foreigners will come to Moscow, walk around, and there are no skyscrapers. If they compare Moscow to capitalist cities, it's a moral blow to us." Stalin announced the Vysotki program in January of 1947 and spent the next 9 months selecting building sites, eventually kicking off construction on September 12, 1947. Part of Stalin's plan for distancing the skyscrapers from the USSR's pre-war history was to disregard the old guard of Soviet architects in favor of a younger generation, ranging from 37 to 64 years old. That makes me feel young. The first challenge facing this project was that none of these architects had ever designed high-rise buildings before. But this was a problem characteristic of most Soviet designers, and not just the slightly younger generation. The architects were required to design buildings with a specific architectural style, which would eventually be called Stalinism. Because of course it would be. This style combined Russian Baroque with Gothic forms, though it was also inspired by the skyscrapers of New York, including the Municipal building in Manhattan. They would all include over-engineered steel frames with concrete walls and ceilings, as well as a handful of the preferred communist motifs like sickles and images of noble working men. By April of 1949, plans for all of the high-rises were complete, and every architect involved was given the prestigious State Stalin Prize. Again, named it after himself, because of course he did. The second major challenge was the weak soil found throughout Moscow called sandy loam. Though ideal for growing tomatoes in your backyard, the sandy, silty soil could hardly support high-rises made of thousands of tons of concrete. Given that it was Stalin's pet project, the best and brightest engineers and scientists were tasked with finding out a way to strengthen the foundations, and well, you know, Stalin's breathing down their necks, so they came through. The result was the first box caisson foundation in the Soviet Union. Caisson is a type of deep foundation most suitable in areas with weak topsoil, as it transfers the load to the deeper, more structurally sound soil beneath it. They're also airtight and therefore suitable in areas near rivers where the soil is wet. For the Seven Sisters, their foundations were made of reinforced concrete, and they went up to 7 meters down into the earth. The ambitious plans required a vast portion of the national industry and practically created new sectors in the Soviet economy. Special factories were built to produce the metal frames and reinforced concrete used in the structures. Altogether, post-Soviet economists have estimated that the project took up half of Moscow's construction effort over the decade that it took place. While each of the Seven Sisters is magnificent in its own right, some have had a more considerable impact on Moscow's skyline over the decades. All 7 buildings were technically started between 1947 and 1950, though many saw work begin years later, and they were all completed between 1952 and 1957. The 7 buildings are Ukrainia, Kotelnichskaya, Embankment Apartments, the Kudrinskaya Square building, the Hilton Moscow Leningradskaya Hotel, the main building of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the main building of Moscow State University, and the Red Gates Administrative Building. Not all these buildings are worth diving into in depth, but we'll look at just a few highlights here. The largest of the sisters is the main building of Moscow State University, found in the Sparrow Hills neighborhood of the city, placing it at a high point overlooking the rest of Moscow. The project had multiple architects because the first one, Boris Arefev, mistakenly planned for the building to be built in an area with high landslide potential. Stalin, apparently, wasn't a bit of a fan of second chances because Arefev was immediately canned from the project in favor of Lev Rudnev. Rudnev's structure was ambitious and eye-catching. It stands at 240 meters, 790 feet tall, and its highest point is a 58-meter, 190-foot spire topped with a 12-ton, 5-pointed star, a symbol found on all of the sisters. Upon its completion, it became the 7th tallest building on Earth and the tallest in all of Europe, a title it held until the completion of the Messeturm in Frankfurt in 1990. The central tower, which utilizes over 40,000 tons of steel for its framework and 130,000 cubic meters of concrete, was inaugurated on September 1st, 1953. The building remains a dominant force in Moscow's skyline and is still the tallest educational building in the world. Unfortunately, though, the building's not open to the public, so you might need to enroll in the university to get inside. That's a big commitment to see an old building. The Leningradskaya Hotel is actually the smallest of all of the Seven Sisters, but it holds a special place in Soviet lore because of a little controversy. The Leningradskaya was the first luxury hotel in Moscow, as it was finished before the Ukrainia in 1954. It was once even featured in the Guinness Book of World Records for containing the world's longest light fixture, which people were, of course, very excited about, as you would expect from really big light fixtures. However, Nikita Khrushchev famously hated the Leningradskaya due to its terrible use of space. The interior floor plan prioritizes vast, luxurious rooms over compact, efficient ones, a clear shirking of Soviet values. The hotel contains 354 rooms, but Khrushchev's sources told him that it could have easily had over 1,000 rooms and that it could have been built for a fraction of the cost, like a good communist building. He felt that more of the hotel should have been made available for rent, but due to the lack of rooms, that was simply not an option. The architect was a man called Leonid Polyakov, and like every architect of the Seven Sisters, he was given a Stalin Prize in 1949 for his design of the building. However, Khrushchev took away the man's prize, claiming that the interior was too wasteful to warrant an award bearing Stalin's name. The rest of the sisters range in height from 138 to 198 meters, that's 452 to 650 feet, and are used as apartments, hotels, and office space for public ministries. While their grandeur varies from structure to structure in modern Moscow, they once all sat comfortably on the list of the 10 tallest buildings in Europe. While the Seven Sisters has a great ring to it in English, the original plan included crowning an eighth sister, which would have been the largest of all the structures and among the world's tallest buildings. The design's working name was the Zaryadye skyscraper due to its location in Moscow's Zaryadye neighborhood. The eighth sister made it through the early planning stages, with architect Dmitry Chalyachin taking the lead on the 275-meter high-rise. However, at the time of Stalin's death, no progress had been made on the construction. The Soviet leadership agreed that the building would have been too grand for their tastes, possibly overshadowing the Kremlin for the title of the city's most magnificent building. So the project was cancelled, and Chalyachin instead built Rossaya Hotel on the predetermined spot. The Seven Sisters still stand majestically throughout Moscow as symbols of the country's past and as examples of truly beautiful architecture. Following many European dictators' traditions, Stalinist architecture has always been grand and elaborate, but the skyscrapers literally took these traditions to new heights. Aside from their lasting design, though, the Sisters actually had a visible impact on Moscow and the Soviet Union's architectural history. Moscow was the first European city to build skyscrapers of this scale, and they've continued to lead the continent with the size of their structures. While London is making a push to overtake them, there's no doubt that Moscow is the skyscraper king of Europe, with 7 of the continent's 9 tallest buildings found in that city. Throughout the rest of the former Soviet Union, there are a handful of copycats that do their best to reflect Stalinist influence, although they lack the original sister scale. These include the Palace of Culture and Science in Warsaw, Casa Praesai Libra in Bucharest, and the Hotel International Prague in, well, Prague. But of course, the Sisters' legacy is much more complicated than that. The skyscrapers were criticized for requiring too many of Russia's resources for buildings with relatively little public utility. Essentially, these were prestige builds, almost the polar opposites of the standard housing blocks, which were the model of efficiency, but, well, totally devoid of character. Although the decade-long Seven Sisters project added about 500,000 square meters, 5.4 million square feet of floor space to the city, split between residential and office space. For comparison, Moscow built over 400,000 square meters of housing in 1949 alone. Modern estimates claim that the prestige project halved housing construction rates from 1947 to 1957 by diverting many of the country's resources. However, they also played a considerable role in establishing Moscow as an industrial center, as the factories and skilled labor used for their construction would become critical for Khrushchev's housing projects in the following decade. The most controversial aspect of the skyscrapers, though, is the man who built them. For many residents of Moscow and the former Soviet Union, the Sisters represent a period of dictatorial rule, where the government had little regard for the lives of their workers, despite their supposed ideals. Yes, Soviet planning led to the construction of the most magnificent 20th century buildings in Europe, but it also led to the oppression of millions of people. Perhaps more than anything else, the buildings represent power and the lengths that some men have gone to prove that they had it. So I really hope you found this video interesting. If you did, smash that like button below. If you didn't, you can utilize the dislike button. That's what it's there for. Also, if you liked this video, we do more videos like this 3 times a week, so subscribe. I can see in the analytics that most of you are not subscribed. Stop wasting your life and get on the side project subscription train, and I'll see you next time.